So this week's webinar, we're going to be looking at an issue that's been a challenge for UK policing for many years. And it only gets more important as we address the current challenges around public confidence and trust in the UK police service. And we're going to be looking at two different approaches on two different technology platforms, but they achieve the same outcome. We'll hear from forces who are using the Pronto on the front line to capture data and update record management systems, and a second force who didn't have access to that technology, therefore turned to Microsoft 365 to enable them to achieve the same outcome. As many people in policing will know, the number of forces do use the Pronto solution, and there are other solutions available for frontline data capture for various functions and apps that are already there. And many forces have been able to use this Pronto solution to address this current issue around vehicle stops and the need to gather activity so we can understand and address the important issue. I'm going to turn to Dan first in a moment to explain the context of the issue and how they've gone around approaching it, with examples from Surrey and Sussex Police's example. And then later on, we'll hear from Len Horton, a regular contributor and viewer of our webinars, about the approach, including a demonstration of their solution. And of course, you'll be able to share on that solution that's been put in the solutions catalogue later as well. And from the outset, I think it's really important that I'll let you know that Dan and Len have been working together on this, even though they're using totally different technology platforms to do this. And that'll become very evident as we go through today's session. So Dan, if you could share your screen so you're ready to take us through this. First of all, could you introduce your role and your role within the Police Race Action Plan and take us through a little bit of a briefing on what the challenge was and how you've gone around it?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm Dan Hiles. I'm a Chief Inspector with Sussex Police, but I'm working with the NPCC and the College of Policing under the Race Action Plan Workstream 2, which specifically looks at not over-policing the black community. And this is really a piece of work that long predates the existence of the Race Action Plan, because it was first referenced 24 years ago in the Macpherson report into the investigation of the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And it was specifically highlighted as a need to start to understand how we use vehicle stops more, have a far greater understanding. And the reason for that is that the community, all parts of the community, when we're talking to people who have lived experiences of being stopped by the police, refer to it as that, as being stopped by the police. And when they say that, they're interchangeably referring to both stop and search and vehicle stops. And whilst stop and search has had really high levels of scrutiny for decades, vehicle stops just hasn't had that same level of understanding around it, and that's what we're seeking to develop.
Brilliant. So perhaps you could take us through the approach you've done in Surrey and Sussex.
Yeah, thank you. So I should really start by contextualising what it is and why we do it. So in the quite a significantly lower use of the power year because of the effects of COVID and lockdowns, in the year 2020, even then with the significantly lower uses of the power to bring a vehicle to a stop, it was still able to facilitate the drug and alcohol roadside testing that took almost 43,000 suspected drunk or drug drivers off the road. So the point of this slide, and the point I'm making here, is that this is a crucial power to policing. The ability to stop a vehicle on the road is directly responsible for saving lives, and there's no two ways about that. None of this work is designed to reduce or dissuade officers' use of this power. If anything, I wish there were more officers better able to be more proactive with the use of this power to keep our roads safe. It literally does that job. It's one of the powers that we use to keep people safe more than any other, if we're honest. So it's important that we understand that as we set out. And as I said, this was first referred to 24 years ago, when the specific question of whether it was going to be overly bureaucratic for frontline officers to be recording their use of this power was considered, and they literally said that it would They were persuaded that it was not the case in relation to that overly bureaucratic question. And for context, of course, in 1999, that was the year the 3210 was released. So that's what the context of the technology and processes they would have had available to them when they were considering that question. So 24 years later, Baroness Casey also makes reference to the use of this power and highlights that actually too much emphasis is placed on the fact that in every circumstance, an officer has the lawful power to pull over a car, because we, of course, have got the ability and the right to ensure that all drivers have actually got a driver's license and insurance. And that's obviously crucially important. But she makes the point that an insufficient amount of time is given to considering the legitimacy of the use of that power. You know, if the power is being abused, then that's something that really needs to be considered as well. And the truth is that because we've never recorded information about vehicle stops in a meaningful way, we have really no answer to that particular criticism. So since in the intervening times between the Baroness Casey's recent publication and 24 years ago when it was first highlighted, it repeatedly comes up in various different publications, and particularly the HMIC FRS, who in 2015 highlighted that there was very little interest in understanding how effectively and fairly these stops are being carried out, and repeated that in 21 when they stated that they remain disappointed that the recommendations have not been introduced. So they set out 3 recommendations, and they were that it's stated within 12 months. We're slightly behind that, but we're doing it after 24 years. But the College of Policing and the Chief Constables should implement and agree a set of minimum recording standards for the use of this particular power. And that has been addressed by this work, because we've put together an annual data return criteria that gives consistency and standardization to how all forces are going to report and reveal data about the use of this power. So that has been taken care of. The second element was that data then should be published by the Home Office, and of course we're going to be collecting that data at a force level and returning it so that it all can be centrally collated and then published in a meaningful way. And the third point was that should be brought under Pace Code A in the same way that stop and search is. Now, at the moment, that's not happening, but in order to support the consistent understanding and use of the power, there will be guidance provided by the College of Policing around not just the use of the power, because that's not going to change significantly or at all, in fact, off the back of this work, but more about how to understand the outcomes from when we start to receive information about how the data is being used.
So if we can jump ahead to perhaps looking at Pronto, Dan, and how I know many forces do have access to Pronto. Perhaps you could just explain what's very briefly what you get reported through this, and this is done on a mobile device at the roadside, isn't it?
Precisely that, yeah. So it's evolved slightly over time for us, and we've been doing this as business as usual since 2021 now. So we've got some experience to back up the changes and the decisions that we've made. But if on your screen, you should be able to see how quick and easy it actually is to complete this at the roadside for officers now. So if you are assigned to an incident already, you can auto-populate the details of that. Then it's simply filling in who it is that you're talking to, where you are, and the vehicle that they're driving. So we're not actually asking for any new information from the driver that we wouldn't have asked for previously. Lots of it can be auto-populated, so the details of who you are and where you are can be auto-populated, particularly by clicking that button on the second column, which drags your location data into that. And from there, once you've got that data, you can run criminal databases, your PNC checks, Interpol even, etc. And likewise, you can run your vehicle checks in the same way. So if this is your starting point, if you've stopped a vehicle, this is your starting point to collect that data. And then from there, you can collect your personal and vehicle details. And if you wish to then go on to do things like stop and search or issue process or anything else really, it enables the copy to function, so you don't have to repeatedly input the people's details. It's just once and done.
Brilliant. So that's the gathering the data, but that is only part of the story. And gathering the data for an annual data report doesn't resolve the challenges we face. So how can forces use the data at a local level to drive action at a strategic level or even at a national level?
Yeah, it's a great question and fundamental to the race action plan to drive that understanding. So what I'm rolling out nationally is a standardized data collection which will generate the same kind of data on any platform that can then be processed and made available to view in the kind of way that we've got available here. Now, this is sanitized data and it may not be as clear as you would like, but what it describes is the level of activity that's occurred during a specified period of time in a specified location, and it automatically highlights on there for you who has been stopped, a selection from a drop-down list of why they've been stopped, also a selection from a drop-down list of what was the consequence of them having been stopped, what happened after the, as an outcome, if you like, and it immediately highlights to us loads of really valuable data that we've never had access to before.
That's fantastic. So we've now got to the point where you've got that standard data set and you've got forces who are using Pronto who can use that solution. But that doesn't solve the problem for the whole of policing, all 43 forces in England and Wales. So Len, perhaps you could explain the challenge that you were faced with in Warwickshire and then go, how about you've done that?
Yeah, okay. We had one of our chief inspectors was tasked with picking up some work on this to actually to meet these requirements, and our superintendent Lee Kemp came out of I think he picked it up under the race action plan, actually came back to me about October, November last year to say this is something we need to capture. At that stage we didn't have our own Power App capability, but so we started looking at a form, and then when we did have our own capability, we sort of upgraded that to say, well, okay, would a Power App be appropriate? And then working with Dan, and I think it was Chief Constables Committee, I think in February, March of this year, Dan, where they ratified exactly the fields that, or the data that we needed to keep. Effectively, he gifted us the data fields that we needed to capture. So we've done effectively a standard Power App version of exactly what they've done on Pronto without the sort of the integrated interface at the front end.
So Len, perhaps you could share your screen and let's take a look at the application in action.
Yep, sure. Hang on a second.
And of course, this has been designed for mobile users first.
It is. Really, we copied it. We got a sort of standard design that we built for use of force, stop and search and things. So we followed that design and created one for vehicle stops. Can you see my screen okay?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're trying to do a similar format each time. So if you're new to this, you might want a little bit about the best practice. If you know what you're doing, you're straight into create new. View previous incidents. I'm not going to show today, David, because it is genuine data in there, and it's got actual registration numbers and things on that. It will have the limitation, of course, of SharePoint at the moment, where it calls back immediately the last 2,000 records. So it's not the best one, and in fact in Warwickshire we're looking at perhaps promoting this into our new Dataverse environment in a couple of months. But so that's the start of it. You'll look at best practice advice. I think Dan's already said that there's two acts here, 163 and 164, and it's important to understand the difference between those two acts. So again,
and, Dan, just quickly, if you can come in here, so that section 136 and 164, for those people with a police white hat will probably understand the difference, but there's a difference for policing and there's a difference for the public as well in terms of what data is compelled to be required. So could you briefly just explain that?
Yeah, thank you. So there's a couple of really important things to consider here, and the first is that as I've already mentioned one of them actually, which is the public conflation of the being stopped by the police in a vehicle stop context and a stop search context is really when we stop a vehicle, take their details, run them through the box, as we like to say, to get their results back. And that doesn't really ever happen in the context of a kind of a safety stop or just a kind of a a consideration stop whereby if somebody was being pulled over simply to say, you know, your fuel cap's open or your coat's sticking out the bottom of your car, or don't drive that way because there's some black ice, or some kind of a safety consideration or other consideration, that those are not the types of scenarios where the public are conflating that with a stop and search scenario. That is simply us doing a nice thing, and what we don't want to start doing is harming the relationship between the police and the public by forcing that scenario to now be a scenario where we're then saying, okay, so what's your name and date of birth, and give us all your details, because clearly that would be an overstretch and harmful to the relationship. So what we're saying is, it's really clear, the scenario where you pull somebody over but we're not taking their details down, we're not requiring you to do so through this process. But those scenarios where you've used the power 163 to pull over a driver and you require their details, this is how you're going to record the fact that you've done that, and how you're going to run those details through the box.
Thanks. So Len, let's see how you would actually put that data into the system.
Yeah, well, we also stole, sorry, we don't steal in the police. We borrowed with pride from Surrey and Sussex their guidance. So there was a little bit of guidance on there, a nice simple little one paragraph thing for people new to the app. So that's where we start with the app. You've got best practice if you want it. I would imagine you might well look at that for the very first time, and then if you're an experienced officer, you probably won't look at it at all. If you create a new incident, in Blue Peter style, here's one I sort of prepared earlier. So we've got, that's where it starts. We start off with driver details, and on the driver details we've got the name, James Bond, gender, man, home address, the ethnicity are aligned to the general ones that we have to apply. So we've aligned it with our stop and search, our use of force, etc., and we ran those by Dan and up to the chief constable's one. So they're the standard ones, self-defined, the officer defined, date of birth, etc. I'll go on. I don't have to fill that in. It will give me a red warning, so I haven't filled all the data in. But there we go. So registration. We've put some a little bit of validation in there to make sure everything is capitalized. We don't allow spaces. So from the data report at the back end, you can get the information quite easily. So you just do that. Forces on the catalogue version, forces may get their approval from their own people to do the API from DVLA. So you could potentially put your registration in, fetch the API, and then populate that and only change it if it's false plates. So a little bit about the vehicle, it will allow me to do that. A little bit about where are you? Are you doing this right there and then, or are you doing it afterwards when you've got back in the car or back to the station? Those are defined. Those are the standard ones. That what are the reasons for the stop? And again, we agreed those with using Dan again to collaborate on that. And was the ethnicity known before the decision to stop the vehicle? We did actually in our test, interestingly, because we're a rural community with people whizzing past quite quickly. And one of our drivers said, I'll never know the ethnicity beforehand. And we said, well, actually, yes, you will. Because if we're in London, you're probably walking past them faster than they're driving, or it could be a pre-planned operation. So, oh, okay, I understand. Were you wearing your video? For us, are you a local? You know, are you in Warwickshire or not? And the outcome would be standard outcomes. So those again, well, I actually, to be honest, I don't even know what those stand for.
Well, fixed penalty starts us off there, but let's crack in with the other two. So it matches what is required in terms of the normal data capture.
It does. So that's how you get the information. So that's how you submit it. That goes whizzed off, and I've got a sanitized version of the Microsoft list there, so you can't see anything that recognizes the individual. So we'll have a reference number, the reason for the stop, the name, the collar number, the status, the date and time. So we've done some testing of this, and as always in any of the standard PDS type style, Power App front end, SharePoint list back end, well, there's no flows. This is one of the most simple apps we've ever built, and you can get, I've dropped it onto a whiteboard and just put it on there for now. So you can click down these different things by visualizing. I don't have a Power BI list. by doing the standard stuff. So you can start looking by gender, by stop outcome. Probably not as rich as that Power BI report that Dan showed on the on the presentation, but it ticks the boxes and enables all forces to comply with the Home Office thing that the requirement I think is mandatory from April next year.
That's right. And of course, it's the fact that the data is captured in the same format means that this becomes really powerful. But we've got two different approaches being able to achieve this. Now, your solution, Len, is already in the PDS solutions catalogue.
It did indeed, David. It went on a couple of weeks ago. We got help from your architect, Tom, and also a Microsoft guy, Chris Wilson, who helped us, and our developer. We believe, and we would say this, wouldn't we? We've written the best guide that you've got so far to make it very easy to deploy the Power App with a script that automatically populates the SharePoint list, because we know that sometimes causes some problems. But then, so there's a little bit of there's always going to be customization. We've got Warwickshire references in the attachments, for instance, but it ought to be a very, very simple one to download and deploy.
And I think for those people who aren't aware, the solutions catalogue is available to everybody in policing. You can become a member of the PDS tenant and you can become a guest and access it. It's only really the 365 administrators who can actually do anything with the download. And it's not like an app store that you'd normally have at home in your phone. It's more raw than that, but still valuable. Len, what's your message to your colleagues in other forces about using the apps, the solutions catalogue?
Yeah, for us, it was our starting point, because way back in March last year, we separated for West Mercia, had no internal capability, and we had to effectively buy in, get a third-party developer to do us some applications that we then shared in previous demos. I know people like Greater Manchester may be on here have used our Use of Force app. I've since gone back to Tom Connor and said, now we've got an easier guide, perhaps we can then revisit our Use of Force and stop and search and upload those. We provided a great source for Warwickshire, not just a source of ideas, it was the art of the possible. And for us, it's given us a great opportunity to look at what other forces are doing. And we're speaking to our local reps and talking to people like Esther to say, perhaps we can start collaborating before they're finally developed, so we can save some time. And I think PDS has helped us we're looking at things like fleet checks and vehicle checks on internal fleet things. So we're starting to collaborate more, not just on finished solutions, but also on the development of apps. So it's been a real bonus for us, and so we're thumbs up people for the solution catalogue.
Thanks, Len. And so Dan, in terms of where we're at now, in terms of how forces are doing in terms of compliance and what's the next steps, what's happening at the moment?
Yeah, but so as you can see, I collected a bit of an update in May as to the progress nationally for the rollout of the collection of the data, that phase. And obviously we've moved on a little bit from May now. We're tipping the 50% of all forces in England and Wales having now actually begun their data collection process, which is fantastic and speaks to all of the work that's being done in those forces to actually make that happen is brilliant. And of course, what that now means is that for those forces that are still outstanding, this product that we're discussing here will be a really key factor to help getting some of those forces over the line. And what that means is that they'll be able to start to enjoy a couple of the two key benefits, which is using that data to tell their scrutiny groups and the public generally that they actually are interested and they care about the legitimacy of the outcomes of the officers' decisions and what's happening, which is exactly what it's about for the race action plan, and improving those outcomes for black people will inevitably also improve the processes and decisions that are being made for all of our community. So it's really is a win-win. But then, of course, one key feature that I will just very quickly mention, which we've not talked about yet, is the fact that all of those vehicle stops that were being conducted previously, and we think that there's twice as many vehicle stops in each force as each force has for stop and search. So whatever your stop search volume is, double that, that's your vehicle stops roughly. That was wasted intelligence, and this is now something that is actually a really rich source of information, potentially linking criminality to vehicles. So you can either search on a plate to get who's been driving that car if you've got a suspect vehicle, or vice versa. So there really are secondary benefits to this work that should not be underestimated.
And I think this is the point that we've come up with here, is that it doesn't matter which technology you're using, the data is the engine room of decision making, not just about the key core issue around the police race action plan, but are we being effective? What intelligence are we gathering? What more information can we do? There's a lot more to it. If you do have any questions, just please pop them in. Just briefly on how to access the PDS solution catalogue. If you anybody can view the types of solutions that we've got available through the PDS website. They're all on screen, and if you're in policing and you're interested in knowing more, just click on the link. Now, if you are already a guest of the PDS 10 and using the fantastic Force Collaboration channel, you won't get this message, you'll go straight through. However, if you do get this message, just go back to the website and fill in the simple form request to become a guest as a police member of staff. You start there, select your force, fill in the details, and within a few hours potentially, or even next day, you'll then have access to the actual core solutions catalog, which is in the secure 365 space, where you can actually get user guides, screenshots, and if you're a 365 administrator, actually download the product. Of course, if you have any issues at all, please get in touch with your colleague via the PDS contact us page, and somebody will be able to help us out with that. No questions come in right now. Just conscious that we are getting close to the bottom of the half hour, and we have got some more events planned, but we are going to take a little break over the summer period to keep things going. So there's the online events that are coming up at the moment. So we're back with our webinars on the 5th of September. The Police Digital Summit. Many of you are now being updated that you can now register to attend. This is going to be our biggest ever summit. We've beavering away in the background to get the final agenda out to you and beginning to get registered. So if you head over to the PDS Red website, you'll be able to register your details. It's public sector only at the moment. We're doing a staggered approach to getting people to attend and get them registered. We want a really good mix of police technologists, police operational policing, the supplier community. We want a really good and vibrant conference this year. So please do get those details coming in. I've just got to have a quick look. We have got a question that's just come in, and it's from Devon and Cornwall, who the ops team have developed a vehicle stop linked to repeat drug driving called Operation Dragoon. This incorporates ANPR imagery to assist officers. It's great to see it linking with this app, linking with Warwickshire, and make this a solution that could provide more valuable insight. That is absolutely why we do these webinars. It's a way of bringing together the work that's going on. Share that in the Force Collaboration channel. I'm sure Len's putting a big thumbs up at me at the moment, saying that he's really keen to learn more on that one. We can start to develop this. So Esther's the business engagement manager for that patch, and I'm sure we'll follow that up with you, Gary, because that's a potentially really great link. And I think if you saw the webinar last week, you'll saw that the very simple app that we demonstrated from Leicestershire Police was about asset capture, and that's really opened the door to them being able to think about how else they can start linking these technologies together, and that's what we really want to do. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to call it a day at the end of this webinar. We hope you can join us back in September. But in the meantime, please keep in touch with us on the PDS website. Look for our events. We've got a fantastic event we're planning right now around helping to build trust in neighbourhood policing. We're not going to give too much details out, but if you keep an eye on the solutions on the website and on the Force Collaboration channel, we're hoping to get a good number of people along there to see that in the very, very near future. It'll be in the autumn, and we've already got a fantastic agenda lined up for that. So no sneaky details quite yet, but we will be putting more information out about that very, very soon. Thanks to Len, and thanks for Dan for sharing their experience today. It's fantastic, and we look forward to seeing you very soon at our next webinar.